Yeah, so my name is Ty Schildts. I am a cell therapy manufacturing associate at the Gates Biomanufacturing Facility on the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus in Aurora, Colorado. And today I'll be talking with you guys about how we came to bring LabKey Sample Manager into our lab. Um, we actually had a previous freezer inventory software. So unlike some labs where they don't have an existing system. We had one and ran against this roadblock where we recognized we were going to have to switch and move that system over. So I'm just going to kind of talk about that, what that timeline looked like, and how we've been using Sample Manager since. So just a quick kind of overview of this presentation. I'll kind of go over who we are, how we ended up bringing LabKey to our lab, the timeline that we were up against, what that data migration looked like. We actually had a rather kind of robust data backup that we had to be able to move into this new kind of LabKey structure that we set up. And then kind of talk about how we've been using LabKey since implementing it and how we kind of plan to use it in the future. Because there are, a whole litany really of functions that LabKey offers, and we want to make sure that we're really utilizing 100% of this software to make our lab kind of as efficient as it can be and make the lives of all of the operators and workers at our company the easiest. So kind of who we are. We're the Gates Biomanufacturing Facility. In 2015, there was a group of researchers and PIs who identified this need to have a manufacturing facility on site that would be able to kind of bridge the gap between the scientific research and kind of the patient impact that comes from that clinical manufacturing. There's this concept in scientific research of this valley of death where there might be really powerful and important scientific discoveries, but because of the amount of work that it takes to get those into that kind of preclinical and phase 1 trials, those discoveries never really manifest into meaningful kind of patient impact. So we are a contract development and manufacturing organization. So, we really serve our clients. Some of those are internal, which would be kind of the PIs and researchers on the University of Colorado campus, but also external clients who come to us and have that kind of set of research, and they need to get that into FDA phase 1 trials. So we're a fully FDA compliant, current good manufacturing practices facility, and our manufacturing team is really split into kind of two sides. There's the cell therapy team and the biologics team, both of which have full PD or process development labs and ISO class 7 clean rooms for manufacturing. Our cell therapy team produces CAR T cell therapies or CAR NK cell therapies, iPSCs, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, kind of a whole group of regenerative medicines. And our process development lab mirrors all the equipment that we have in GMP so that we can kind of scale, or so that we have that one-to-one kind of process for when we do that tech transfer. Our biologics team works with E. coli, and you can see this image here is their 50-liter working volume fermenter to produce those large molecule protein biologics. So think of things kind of like insulin, large molecules like that. I am a part of the cell therapy team. Just let's heads up there. So what brought us to LabKey? Like I kind of said, we already had a previous freezer inventory software or freezer inventory software. And even before November 2022, we were recognizing that there were some kind of gaps with that software that was negatively impacting our processes. So we had to host that software on our own server, which was costly. And the software would crash. So we would have to reach out to our IT team and have them reset that server before we could go back into it and kind of complete the work that we were doing. It also meant that when we were performing tasks, if it crashed, everything before that you haven't saved would be lost, or potentially corrupted. And it was really something you don't want to have happen when you're working in these LN2 freezers, because then you have to go digging back in there and kind of figure out, okay, what was the last thing that was saved? In November 2022, we were made aware that this freezer inventory software was going to lose its support and that we would be operating that software at risk, meaning, we could potentially completely lose the software. We would have to rely on old and potentially outdated data backups. Our audit trails potentially would be incomplete and we wouldn't know kind of what has happened where with certain samples. And we can have lost and missing samples. And for anyone that works in an LN2 freezer, you know how frustrating it is if you go to open a box and a sample that you think should be there either isn't there or you have the incorrect sample there, because then that means you have really two samples that are misplaced in the system. So we formed a team internally and we were tasked with identifying what kind of potential replacements we could bring into our lab to cover us. And we had the understanding that any replacement we brought in would need to be entirely operational with all of our old data migrated to it, running by the end of September 2023. So one of the first things that we did kind of as that team is try to identify what qualities this replacement freezer inventory software would need. Probably the biggest one, and one that I'll kind of talk about a couple more times in this presentation, is 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. This is an FDA requirement that we have to adhere to, meaning that all of our digital documents need to be reliable, integral, authentic. We need audit trails for these documents. We need to be able to have really reliable data backups. We need to be able to present these to the FDA if we ever get audited. We also need individual logins for all of our users so that we can log what actions they take. We couldn't have, a shared login, or, if you're using an Excel file, you can't track, entirely who's doing what in that sometimes. So 21 CFR Part 11 compliance is a quality requirement that is just absolute at our facility. We would also need to be able to store all the different kind of sample types that we produce for all of our different clients. This one's really important because as we bring on different clients, they might produce different kind of sample types or store those samples in different size containers, be it cryo vials, microcentrifuge tubes, LN2 cassettes and freezing bags. So we need to be able to kind of store all of that in the system and identify it in there so that all our operators kind of know what's in there and what they're looking for. We would need to be able to track the flow of samples from location to location and team to team, meaning when we send out samples or final product from our clean rooms into our kind of cryo rooms and cryo storage, we need to be able to kind of track that and have those timestamps for those actions. But also, if we're transferring samples from one of our teams, like the cell therapy team, to the quality control team for assays or testing, need to have something that kind of denotes that so we can look back and see the entire kind of lifespan of that sample and where it's been moved within the facility. And then this last one, accessibility and ease of use, really seems like it might be a want, but for us, we determined it really was a need because as a CDMO, it's in the best interest of our clients if our softwares are easy to use and really accessible so that we're not spending as much time in those softwares and really spending more time doing the work that we are paid to do. I know that for our previous software, when it would crash and we'd have to reboot it, those are hours that actually, potentially could be billed to clients because you're spending that time working there. So we needed something that provided, the best value to not just us, but then the clients that we worked for. So our team trialed numerous potential replacements, moving up, into May 2023. So this would be about 6 or 7 months after kind of forming that team, using kind of the free trials for these different potential replacements and kind of analyzing them and speaking with the different, teams at the GBF. we, after that long kind of period, we identified that LabKey Sample Manager really provided the most benefit to our organization for what we needed. And some of the reasons we chose that was that 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. Uh, we really appreciate that LabKey Sample Manager, encrypts all, there's total encryption of all of your files. You have a, unique Amazon Web Service kind of instance for all your storage. They do regular backups for you. That one's kind of a big one so that we don't have to sit there and manually back up, anytime we make changes in the system. So they store and complete these backups for you. It was a really easy program to use. I mean, it's incredibly intuitive, which makes it really nice for when you have to kind of train others on it or show this program to other people and have them perform actions in it. It just made sense. It was really customizable, and this was important because we could customize LabKey Sample Manager to really fit our structure as opposed to having to alter or change kind of the way we do things or the way that we store samples to fit a more rigid system. So, we were able to kind of identify how we wanted to set up LabKey Sample Manager and then have it fit our kind of style of storage that we previously kind of had from our older software, our freezer inventory software. It was also accessible in browser, and this is something that our previous inventory software did not have. So we were relying on using computers that had that software downloaded onto it. We could access it from some VPNs, but that would make the program run really slow. So being accessible in browser allowed our operators to kind of access this system from home, or if they're just working remotely, to look up those samples and kind of pull those reports. So these operators didn't have to come on site or go to a specific room within our facility. And then it was also scalable with user licenses. This is really important to us because as we onboard clients, our work might increase exponentially. We might feel the need to add those licenses. And it's something as easy as just reaching out to LabKey Sample Manager and getting those licenses kind of purchased and running, and then you're good to go. Also, as administrators, we're able to kind of change where those active user licenses move to. So it makes it a lot easier for me because I don't have to, as an administrator, reach out to LabKey Sample Manager to kind of change where those licenses go. I'm in complete control of those myself. So we presented this to leadership. Leadership kind of gave us the green light. We started moving ahead with getting LabKey Sample Manager. We are a public institution, so we had to submit a cost justification to the university to demonstrate that LabKey Sample Manager was really, the most cost-effective and best value for our organization and for those public funds that we receive. And then in September 2023, we finally had the contract signed and the purchase order submitted. There's a term that some people like to use that, we move at university speed, which means, there's just a lot of kind of checkpoints and a lot of steps it takes to be able to get these softwares onto our site. So, I mean, one of the things that I'll say kind of later is I really do appreciate Jason Ledley, who worked with us and really was very patient and stayed with us as it took those multiple months of trying to select this program, get that cost analysis submitted, getting these contracts signed through multiple kind of points throughout the university and getting this purchase order. So at this point in September, we have this contract signed and this purchase order submitted, but now we really only have 1 month of runway left before it needs to be entirely operational. And one of the things that Lance kind of talked about earlier was, well, how long does it take to kind of migrate from an old system? Right now, we're up against 4 weeks. We need 4 weeks for this to run. So we brought our old data to LabKey and we said, okay, help us get this going. So we worked with Hannah and her team to kind of design how we wanted LabKey to look for us. And what we really decided on ultimately was we needed a client-centric sample structure. We wanted everything to flow down from that client. So client, project code, batch, and then that sample, so that we can kind of isolate one client if we need to and kind of look at their samples, or if we want to send those samples out and not have what might be potentially, confidential information between clients shared. It also allowed us to look at any sample and really see um, all of those qualities, that client code, that project code attached to that sample. So once we had set that kind of structure up with LabKey Sample Manager with a lot of Hannah's help, thank you, we were able to give them what we had as a kind of set of data. So this export comes from our old freezer inventory software. And as you can see, there are 13,000 rows of sample data. So this incredibly massive kind of block of data that spans about 6 years. And we needed it to kind of fit this structure and be able to go in there. We worked internally to clean it up a little bit, but again, I really have to thank Hannah because she was able to kind of go through it and say, well, does this kind of work? Does this make sense? And she was able to kind of align it to that already established sample structure that we had. And that made it so that we could just upload it as a single document and have all that information live in our system. So we didn't have to manually add all of these different cells or all these different rows and columns. We could simply upload or import from file and add all of these samples in one just quick upload. And because of that, we were able to be completely live by October 2023. So in October 2023, we officially kicked off Sample Manager at our lab. That is all the data fully migrated, the sample structure completely set up. We had all the SOPs done, and we were ready to go. So in that first month of operation, we added 234 samples to the system. We were able to train 18 operators to use it because, again, it is just really easy to use, and it's a really kind of simple training process where you're able to kind of walk through them and say, here's our search bars. Here's where we can kind of view that 2D visualization of the freezers. We met with LabKey 3 times to kind of refine it. So we may have set up, hey, this is how I kind of initially want this structure to look. But as we were using it, we said, well, maybe it'd make more sense to do this. And that means, what this means for us is that unlimited support was something that we really didn't have with our previous inventory software. All the support from that previous software was kind of locked behind a paywall. So anytime we needed help or needed something, we felt, we were kind of held at ransom, or our data was held at ransom. This is really nice because we can say, hey, I think it might be more efficient this way. And Lance and Hannah and the entire LabKey Sample Manager team can kind of reach out and say, well, here are, some of your options. This might make more sense. And they also know about more of those features that you might not already know about. So it's kind of like, what questions am I not asking? What features do you think make the most sense for what I'm trying to achieve here? We also had 0 interruptions of service or unexpected downtimes, which again is really important because as our clinical team is processing and sending samples out, we need to be able to add those and have those logged and all of the actions for that audit trail logged into the system in real time. So any amount of kind of downtime really would equate to us a deviation where we'd have to kind of document why, because we need everything done contemporaneously in real time. And so having used Sample Manager for the last 6 months or so, we got our team together and we tried to really roadmap what does LabKey Sample Manager look like for us over the next couple years. What do we want? What features are we most kind of interested to add for our instance of LabKey Sample Manager, and how can we most efficiently use it? And some of the things that we were looking at is adding our -80 and -20 kind of freezers to the system. Currently, we're only using the LN2 freezers, but just because of the really sensitive nature of -80 Celsius samples, you don't want to have those doors open too long either. So being able to kind of really map those, I think, can really ensure the integrity of those samples that are at -80. And also, no one likes to open a freezer and have to dig around in all the frost in there and try and find what they're looking for. So I think by kind of adding and mapping those units to the system, we can more efficiently have our operators kind of locate and use those samples. We also had our process development lab say, hey, it might be really nice to use this to help us organize the storage that we have downstairs. Because there's a lot of kind of consumables, reagents, and items that move in and out of those labs, and they're not as strictly controlled, they can sometimes have struggles like organizing those. And I think, we can use this lab key sample manager to kind of input all of the expiries and kind of the numbers of reagents and consumables that are moving in and out of there and help them kind of organize and understand what their consumption rates are, and better kind of anticipate restocking needs. We also have the option, and we haven't done this yet, but we're looking forward to doing this, is mapping the physical freezer locations in the system. This might not sound as important to someone who's been at the company for a long time, but if you have a new employee and you're training them to use this inventory software, it's really nice for them to be able to see what units or what freezers are in which rooms. So instead of just saying, this is in this one equipment, they can see which samples are in that equipment in what room, and be able to really efficiently go and find and kind of move those samples as needed. Workflows are something that we haven't used yet, but we see a lot of value in because we move samples out of our clean rooms into that cryo LN2 storage, and those will be assigned to QC for kind of assays or different kind of testing. And so if we're able at the point of kind of adding those into the system, be able to attach those workflows with automatic notification systems via email to both the QC analysts that are testing them and their managers, we can make that process a lot more efficient and have it all kind of stored within that lab key sample manager system so that we're not kind of spreading it across different systems at our work site. Barcoding is another one that we find really useful. We're really looking forward to adding that into this kind of system so that we can be even more efficient when it comes to checking in and checking out of those samples, and ensuring that all that data is stored on just the scan of a barcode. And then I come from kind of a supply chain background, so one of the ones that personally I'm most interested in is cycle counting or having that kind of spot checking ability within the system. And this is one of those things where we just kind of reached out and said, hey, we're interested in this. What do you think, how do you think we can kind of implement this? And what do you think that kind of looks like? And so, we're really able to set up this list of things that we want to kind of apply, and then just kind of lean on that support that we receive from Sample Manager and their ability to really customize the system and fit it to our needs to be able to implement that, which kind of helps us streamline our processes across the whole organization and not just with our LN2 freezers. And I think that, that's really major because our previous software was just storing things in LN2 freezers. But now we're able to really expand and make a bunch of different operations across our facility more streamlined and more efficient, which saves us a lot of time and money. And then also we extend that to our clients, and our clients can save that money that it would normally cost us to perform those operations without LabKey Sample Manager. And so with that, I would like to thank really specifically Hannah and Lance, because when we were doing that data migration, they were integral in getting that up and running in, I would say, less than 3 weeks. I mean, I know Lance kind of was saying 4 to 8 weeks was what they typically forecast, but we were able to move all of those samples in and get the entire program running in under 3 weeks. And that includes, from the time that contract is signed, that includes getting the whole structure set up, getting all of the samples into that freezer, going through those trainings with them, and being able to reach out to them whenever we had any kind of questions or comments, or if we wanted to kind of restructure how we looked at things. And then a big thank you as well to Jason, because I know that it can be kind of a tiring process to have to work through the university and all their different controls. And it took months and months and many, many emails and clarifications, but we were able to get through it. And then Seth and Ronan are two team members at the GBF who are part of that team to onboard Sample Manager, and they've been incredibly great. So I just wanted to make sure I thanked them for their contributions. And with that, I think I can take any questions you guys might have.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ty. It's super cool to see kind of such a quick turnaround. And yeah, thanks for your shout out. I love the data piece of it. So it was super fun. As a reminder, yeah, feel free to put in some questions. We have a few in that I'll sort of ask you, Ty. It looks like there's some other folks that are kind of in these regulated environments. Have you had to do sort of additional quality assurance or quality control on the software for sort of those regulatory bodies, FDA, et cetera? Or what does that process look like for you?
Yeah, I think there is the validation aspect which LabKey Sample Manager provides through that third party. And I think besides that, that's it, making sure that, the system is validated and that you are kind of that CRF Part 11 compliant with those audit trails. But that's the only thing, that we've run up against is making sure it's compliant. So I would say, no, I haven't had anything else where I've had to, perform any kind of extra steps or extra steps.
Awesome. And kind of maybe on those lines too, a question that I had was sort of around how you're feeling like being audit ready and things like that. I'm not sure you've had to undergo an audit since Sample Manager, but how are you feeling for that sort of potential thing to happen?
Yeah, I feel, incredibly comfortable with it, knowing that there are those backups. I mean, that's probably one of the most crucial ones, is having all those individual logins tracked and then stored on that audit log, and those audit logs and all your actions backed up. So you can go back if there is any kind of, if you ever ran into one of those issues, or if you were ever asked. And for us, it's not just FDA audits. We can have, some internal audits that we'll have through the university, or sometimes clients will say, hey, before we want to be onboarded, we want to make sure that your systems are set, so we can have audits with them before or even after, if a client says, hey, one of the really nice features of LabKey Sample Manager is that you can really easily export that data. So if a client said, hey, can you just send me a list of all of the samples you have for us? Anytime that you have a field in Sample Manager in those kind of Excel looking fields, you can export that. So I've even had internally some people say, hey, do you know how many samples we have for this client? And I can just Excel spreadsheet send everything they have to them, really instantly. So I would say very comfortable. If anyone ever needed to know, what we have in there, or if there was an audit coming down the trail, feeling, very confident that I'm able to kind of provide those digital records as if they were paper records, which is really what CFR kind of Part 11 compliance is about. Is your digital documents need to be as strong as if you kept those documents on paper and have them ready, at the ready. And with Sample Manager, we feel the confidence that we have that.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And then I think one of the last questions that I have is maybe talking a little bit more about sort of how the adoption of Sample Manager was in your lab, and if you have any tips for folks that might be struggling getting sort of users to adopt, and how that process looked like.
Yeah, I think for us, I would say, regrettably, I think we burned a lot of runway really early. So we had to be thorough. We had to test all those different kind of programs, but really making use of that free trial. This might not be the case for everyone, but I know that we kind of ran out of time on the free trial. And we said, hey, can you, extend it? And we had it extended kind of multiple times, so we could kind of tinker with different options in that system. But if you really utilize that free trial and you work with Sample Manager to see kind of how that could work for you and how you want to set it up, you can have that mental kind of image. So when you're ready to go, you say, okay, I really liked this kind of setup or this structure. And I'm looking to add, these are that kind of things. Also, I mean, I think having a really clean data set to start helps. So that was something where when it was time to go, we finally sat down and we looked at the data we had from our old inventory software and we said, this is kind of a mess, and we had to sit some people down and look at it. But even with, kind of a messy, incredibly large data set, you guys were really able to help us get that aligned to that structure and that kind of vision that we had and have it running.
Awesome. Good to hear. Oh, someone was asking if you're printing labels from within Sample Manager or doing that sort of outside.
We haven't started that yet, but there's actually a big push from elsewhere in our organization to start that kind of barcoding. And so being able to incorporate that kind of into our freezers without having to kind of go through some other third party or go through extra steps, I think we're really looking forward to. So at the same time that we can put barcodes on our kind of ambient storage in our warehouses, we will be able to add it into our kind of freezers kind of seamlessly as well.
Yeah, awesome. And if anybody is using the bartender integration, feel free to sort of put that in the chat and we can have kind of a whole run on that. And Lance and I are always happy to support. I think those are all the questions for you, Ty. Thank you so much for presenting. That was awesome to hear.
Yeah, thank you.